when we speak about the teaching of the Buddha, we must remember that there are different levels of teaching and there are different levels of practice. So this doesn't mean that everyone should be practicing at the same level. So in our series of talks, first we spoke about devotion. That is the basic level of practice, devotion. And devotion really is the devotion to the ideal of perfection. So at that level you are not perfect, you have not become perfect, but you are thinking of this ideal of perfection and desiring to become perfect. So there we pay respects to the ideal, and the ideal is seen as the Buddha. So the Buddha becomes this ideal and goal in life, but we have not reached that goal. So this is aspiring to that goal. So at the second level, we have the practice of good conduct, which is the first step in becoming good, is to practice good behavior. So we are trying to correct the behavioral part, where we don't come in conflict with other people and we do things which are considered to be good, just and fair and that sort of thing. Good relationships. And then we go to the next step, which is the purification of the mind. So purifying the mind, which leads to the true happiness. So this is a higher level, that is the third stage. So everyone is not able to practice at that level. So it is mainly those who renounce the world, the worldly life, the materialistic life, and those who become monks or nuns. These are the people who will be able to practice that in full. The ordinary householder or layman is not able to attain those 4 jhanas. To attain the 4 jhanas is a very high level of practice. So today, those who practice at that level are called mystics. So the mystics are at a higher level of practice. And even higher level than that is the level of the enlightened or awakened people, awakening to the realities of life. Now that is the level that I am going to speak about today, or this talk. Now although we may be happy by purifying and calming the mind, our mind may be tranquil and happy, but we still have a problem. And that problem is we begin to grow old, we begin to fall sick and die. All religions begin to talk about eternal happiness and eternal life. Why are they talking about eternal happiness and eternal life? Because our happiness is impermanent and life is impermanent. So this is a problem that people try to solve through the practice of religion. And most religions, the solution is in the next life, after death. They believe that they can go to heaven where they'll have eternal happiness and eternal life. That is just a belief and a hope. It's based on hope and belief. But here the Buddha speaks about this same problem, but the solution is not in the next life. It's here and now. It can be solved in the present. And the way to solve this is not to take refuge in some external supernatural power, but to take refuge in yourself. This is the mature way of doing it. It is the child that goes out to seek help in others. But the mature person is a person who begins to help himself or herself. So that self-reliance is the main thing in maturity. So this is a way of practicing religion in this self-reliant way, which is the humanistic way. The humanistic way of practicing religion, instead of the theistic way where we begin to depend on an external God or the creator of the world or some supernatural being. Humanistic way is to make use of the human intelligence and the human efforts, human energy to solve the problems. Today the world is gradually moving towards the humanistic way. This is why people tend to give up their religious dogmas and begin to think on their own and also depend on modern science and technology to solve their problems. That's the humanistic way. So as the human beings advance and evolve, religion will automatically become humanistic. So today Buddhism is that religion that it's not, Buddhism is really not another religion among other religions. It is a critique of religion, where religion is examined and understood. And this way, the religious problem, which is the problem of existence, it is because we exist that we have this problem. So it is the problem of existence that religion is trying to solve. Now the problem of existence is what the Buddha called dukkha, or suffering. And that is that we are all born, and from the time we are born, we begin to grow old. The aging process. At first, the young child begins to become an adult, But it doesn't end there. We go beyond that and we begin to grow old and then ultimately fall sick and die. This is the problem. We don't like that. People celebrate their birthdays, but they don't celebrate the death day. But the problem is, if we are born, we always have to die also. We don't realize that. When we celebrate the birthday, we don't realize that we have started approaching death. The only reason that we could celebrate a birthday is to celebrate the fact that we have not died yet. We have been able to survive so many years. But still, that itself becomes the cause of our unhappiness. So, all this means that our life is impermanent. Not only life, everything in the world is impermanent. So the Buddha pointed out that the way to solve this problem is to understand existence. It is because we don't understand what we call existence that this has become a problem. We all believe that we are existing. But is it a fact? No one questioned that. If a thing is continually changing, say like the wave in the ocean, a wave is all the time changing. It's a change. So if things are changing all the time, do they really exist? That's the problem. In ancient times, the philosophers were talking about this change. What they saw was, they thought there was some permanence in the change. They used two words to talk about this. One was being and the other one was becoming. The change was called becoming. And the permanence was called being. And what this means is, if you have a golden ring or something like that, you can melt that gold and convert it into something else. So that means the ring has disappeared and something else has taken the place. It has changed. But there is something that has not changed, which is gold. Gold has not changed. So that change was called becoming. That means the ring became something else. So the change was a becoming. But the gold was still being there in the same way as gold. so that the permanent aspect was seen as being. Now, when these Western scholars, they came to study Buddhism, he saw the Buddha speaking about impermanence. So when they saw the Buddha speaking about impermanence, they thought he is talking about becoming. So there is a word that the Buddha used, bhava. The word bhava is being, not becoming. But these translators thought, because the Buddha is speaking about impermanence, he cannot be talking about being, he must be talking about becoming. Bhava as becoming. But that was a mistake. The Buddha was talking about being here. It is because we are thinking that being for the Buddha was not a reality. Being was a concept. The Buddha saw this as a concept, that we form the concept of being. We are changing from the time we are born. We are in a process of change. We keep on changing. The person who is born is not the same person who dies in old age. The body has changed. The mind has changed. Everything has changed. It's something else. But we don't think like that. We think it is the same person who died. So, that concept of being, which is a continuity of existence, that is what is creating the problem. Because I am being, I am born, then I grow old, and then I die. So the I is always there, the being. So as long as we think like that, then we are thinking about the change and the impermanence of our being. And that is how we become unhappy about it, because we don't want that. Because we are being, we want to continue to be. And we want to continue to be young. No, we don't want to continue as old people. There's a problem. So being is a static concept. A static concept in a dynamic reality. A dynamic reality. We are trying to cling on to a static concept, which is an illusion. So, the static concept is really emotional. It is an emotion that wants us to believe in the existence or being. Whereas when we think and reason out, we see the impermanence of these things. There is no real being. But our emotions tell us, no, there is a being. I want to be. So we cannot face death. So when we cannot face death, we have to somehow believe that even when the body dies, I will still remain. Maybe go to heaven or go to hell and remain somehow. So we want that permanence, which is all emotion. So actually what is happening is the emotion is coming in conflict with our reason. The emotion and reason are in conflict. And when emotion and reason are in conflict, what happens? Emotion always wins. That's what is happening. That's the point. So therefore we become unhappy as a result. Because the emotion is being frustrated, disappointed. So we become unhappy. So what this emotion is doing is, what the Buddha pointed out was that this emotion is saying, this is mine. It is the attachment to this body. The emotion becomes attached to the body and say, this body is mine. This body is mine, this mind is mine, these feelings are mine, this consciousness is mine, these thoughts are mine. We begin to personalize. And what we call the self is the sum total of all that we call mind. All that is mine has been personalized. And through the process of personalizing, we arrive at a personality. That personality is the myself. Because I have personalized it. If I didn't personalize the body, if I didn't personalize the mind, if I didn't personalize my feelings, my thoughts, my consciousness, then there will be no personality. So the personality came into being through personalization. And why do I personalize this? Because of my emotion. It is the emotion that is doing the personalizing. That emotion is what is called tanha, usually translated as craving. Tanha is the emotion. So it is that emotion that does the personalizing. And the personalizing results in the personality. And once the personality has come into being, I have come into being. So I come into existence, not because of birth. I have come into existence because of personalized. This is the important thing to understand. Normally we think, I came into existence because I was born. I was not born. The body was born. The birth of the body is simply the birth of the body. But the birth of the body became my birth because I personalized the body. If I didn't personalize the birth of the body cannot be my birth. And if I didn't personalize the body growing old is not my growing old. And if I didn't personalize the body, the death of the body is not my death. You see, whatever is happening to the body, I say this is happening to me. Why? Because I have personalized it. So it is this personalizing process which is called upadana, usually translated as clinging or grasping. This is not just ordinary clinging or grasping, this is personalizing. And through this process of personalizing, the personality comes into being, or I come into being. This is why Descartes said, I think, therefore I am. Naturally, when you think, I think, if you say, I think, then, of course, the next is I am. So, I think is the personalizing of the thinking process. When you say, I think, and therefore I am is the personality coming into being. So the important thing to understand is the only way to get out of this suffering is to learn to depersonalize what has been personalized. But as I said earlier, it cannot be done by simply rational thinking, because the emotion is involved in this. It is necessary to get rid of the emotion before we can even understand this properly. So the emotion must be understood. What is an emotion? The emotion is not something that is built inside. This is a mistake that Sigmund Freud made. He thought that emotion is something built inside. You can't do anything about it other than find some kind of expression for this emotion. We have to satisfy the emotion some way or other. So he also realized that we cannot always satisfy these emotions or gratify the emotion. So the only thing that can be done is to sublimate the emotion. That is to convert the emotion to something else which is acceptable. Now, if I am angry, the anger is an emotion, and I want to kill a person because I am angry. So, but then that's not a good thing. So, we have to sublimate that. to express that in a good way. That is what is called sublimation. That is the solution that he found. But the problem is, that is not going to solve the problem really, because he wrote a book called Civilization and its Discontents. To be civilized is to sublimate the emotions. That is how we become civilized. But in becoming civilized, we become unhappy people because we are discontent. There is no real contentment. But Buddha solved this problem in a different way. This is important to understand. What the Buddha pointed out was, this emotion is not something built inside, seeking satisfaction or gratification. Emotion comes from outside. That's the important thing. It's not something that comes from inside and goes out, but it is something that starts from outside and comes in. So, when Freud used the word instinct, which means is the emotion built inside, the Buddha used the word asava. Asava is also very badly translated today. Very often you find it translated as canker. What is a canker? It's like a sore or something like that. It's coming from the root through. Through is to flow. It's a flowing. Asava means flowing in. That is why some people translate asava as influx. But I translate asava in a more meaningful way. And that is influence. Influence. Influence is also flowing in. So asava is really a flowing in. How does it flow in? It is simply starting with the stimulation of the senses. When the senses are stimulated, nerve impulse goes from the sense organ to the brain. That is also flowing in. And then the brain begins to make a decision about what is being seen. At first, there is seeing of something, the process of perception. And then you begin to interpret what you have perceived through the process of conception. And once you have interpreted what you have seen, then according to that interpretation, a message is sent to the glands, and the glands begin to secrete a hormone, and that hormone begins to make certain parts of the body overactive or some parts underactive, and this way a change occurs in the whole body. That is what we call an emotional arousal. If it is anger, adrenaline flows into the blood. If it comes in the form of a sexual desire, a sexual hormone flows into the blood. So this is how it happens. So it all starts from outside. Stimulation of the senses. So when the senses are stimulated, this whole reaction occurs. And when the emotion is aroused, tension occurs in the muscles. Muscles become tensed. And this tension is like the bow and the arrow. You pull the string with the arrow, it becomes more and more tense. The more tense it becomes, the more it wants to release the arrow. And then there is the action taking place. So in a similar way, the gun and the trigger is also a similar thing. So in a similar way, this whole reaction of the organism results in action, which is the behavior. So if emotion is something that is coming from outside, it is possible to stop that. It is possible to stop that reaction. You don't have to be trying to satisfy the emotions or gratify the emotions. The important thing is to learn to stop the reaction and calm the mind. So the calmness and tranquility of the mind is the solution to the problem. Now that is what we were talking about earlier also. So this tranquility of mind was the solution of the Buddha, not sublimation. That's the difference. And with the tranquility comes the relaxation of the body muscles also. That's the important thing to understand. So that emotional excitement leads to the personalizing, and the personalizing leads to the personality, and the personality leads to the birth, old age, disease, death. All the suffering comes from there. This is why the Buddha said, tanha is the cause of this suffering, which is the emotion. And the emotion can be brought to an end through the proper technique, which was that supernormal eightfold way. So we have to go beyond the normal to a supernormal state to solve that problem. So this was the ending of the problem of dukkha or suffering. And this can be done only by calming the mind. But the mind cannot be calmed without calming our behavior. So the first step is to calm the behavior. And the behavior cannot be calmed if our goal is not calmness. If our goal is simply seeking sensual pleasure, we cannot calm the mind or the behavior. So this is why this whole problem of existence can be solved only by going gradually. First the devotion, then the control of behavior, the good life, sila, it is called sila. The devotion is called saddha. Saddha, sat means what is good and true. Dha is to uphold. So that is the devotion. And then comes the sila, which is the good behavior. And then comes samadhi, which is the purity and tranquility of mind. And after samadhi comes the understanding of the problem. This understanding of the problem is really the solution of the problem. When we have understood that there is no being, although we think there is being. So this is a paradigm shift. It's a paradigm shift. But in this process of becoming aware of this delusion, it is really a maturity of our consciousness. The consciousness has to evolve. Normally, all animals are just conscious of a world. They see, hear, smell, taste, touch. Through the senses, we become conscious of a world. That is consciousness. But this consciousness is taking place without our knowledge. We are not in control of this. It's just happening. It's happening due to the presence of the necessary conditions. When the necessary conditions are there, it happens. When the necessary conditions are not there, it doesn't happen. We are not doing anything. In other words, it is an unconscious process. It is from a state of unconsciousness that consciousness comes into being. But that consciousness is actually what is called cognition. That is seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, touching, thinking. This is cognition. But this whole process is occurring in an unconscious state. So, if we want to stop this process, we have to become conscious of that. It is only by becoming conscious of that this process can be stopped. So this is the important thing to understand. So this whole process of the practice is an effort to become conscious of the process of consciousness itself. It is not trying to become conscious of something outside. It is trying to become conscious of the process of consciousness. So that is the paradigm shift. So this paradigm shift cannot occur automatically. You have to go through that process. Which has to be done consciously. The growth, this is the growth of consciousness. Consciousness grows fully only when consciousness has become conscious of itself. That is the ultimate point in the evolution of consciousness. So when we speak of the Buddha, we are speaking of a person who has evolved to that highest level where a person becomes conscious of consciousness. That is the meaning of nirvana. So nirvana is not simply calming the mind. That simply calming the mind is samadhi. But when we speak of nirvana, we are speaking about the growth and evolution of the consciousness to the point where this consciousness becomes conscious of itself. And when that has happened, that emotional agitation, excitement will never come back. So that is becoming calm while being active. The action is there. It's not inactivity. But in the samadhi state, it is all inactive. The calmness. But you can be active and at the same time be calm inside because the emotional excitement never takes place. This is the important thing to understand. And in this process, the perceptual process is going on. Conceptual process is going on. But the emotional process has stopped. And the conceptual and perceptual process is aware of itself. And because the perceptual process is aware of itself, It sees through the process. And therefore, when you perceive a book, for example, there is a book in front of me, and I perceive the book as normal people do. But at the same time, what you are perceiving is not just the book. What you are perceiving is the perception of the book. So instead of saying there is a book in front of me, you can say there is the seeing of a book. So I think this is a good time to stop. You can stop here and you can ask questions here.